believed to be heroin that has had fentanyl added to it, and they die, they'll probably bring them back to life with naloxone. Absolutely true. But that's not the majority of the people we're actually seeing impacted by fentanyl today. So I think we need to educate parents. I think we need to educate politicians. I think we need to educate community members, and we need to educate kids that it's a different story today. This is, and for the last decade that I've lived in the city, I've been working with groups such as Support Treatment Education Prevention, STEP, and I always want to say thanks to John Fraser, who's very helpful in getting funding for 2 drug treatment centers in the city, Maison Flat, Vanier, and Dave Smith Youth Drug Treatment Center. But this is much different than anything else we've ever faced. In those cases, the vast majority of users of drugs knew what they were taking. And we're going to hear from a young lady tonight who's going to talk about what happens when you think you're taking one thing and take something quite different. Crack cocaine used to be our biggest challenge. In fact, I referred to the city to get attention from politicians as the crack capital of Canada. Because crack cocaine was our problem. The people using crack knew they were using crack cocaine. Today, that's not true. The people using everything else instead are getting fentanyl. And as a result, we are seeing many, many overdoses. Stolen an oxycodone from their parents previously, so they think they know what they're getting. And they'll cut it in half and share it with a friend. And their friend will get high and they'll get dead. That's what's happening. So when we have this discussion around to save lives, because I'll tell you right now, it's not going to have the impact you think it is. Second piece on the supervised consumption side is that we're still, 100% of the people entering that facility are still going to be committing crimes, most often, to get enough money to buy an illegal pharmaceutical off the street, to walk into a supervised consumption site and shoot it into their veins. If we're going to have a supervised consumption site, we should be providing the opioids. It works in Switzerland, and we will save lives. We will still have a problem with people shooting an unknown substance into their veins and often dying. Also remember that the vast majority of people using supervised consumption sites do not use it 100% of the time. In Vancouver, in a study in 2009, it was 15% of the time they actually used the facility. The rest of the time, they shot up somewhere else. And if you've ever been in East Hastings in Vancouver, you'll see dramatically more people sitting outside of the facility shooting up than inside, because they want to share either the drug or the kit they're using, or they didn't own the kit, so they'll share what they've purchased. So you'll still have a lot more people outside shooting up than inside, unless you're providing the opiate. So I guess more than anything else, I think we need to understand that if we're going to be successful right now on this, it's going to be education first, educating young people that they ought not expect they're going to go buy fentanyl, that it's not going to be something they'll refuse on a street corner. That having them think that, oh, I won't take fentanyl is not going to be enough. It won't matter what they think they're taking, unless they steal it from mom and dad's medicine cabinet, which sounds funny to say. Unless they stole it from mom and dad's medicine cabinet, God help them. Because right now, and we're seeing it across the country, we saw it in the United States, it started in 2007 when fentanyl hit there. They'll have 60,000 people die this year from opioid overdose deaths in the United States. We'll have 3,000, probably move to 4,500 next year. It hit the U.S. in about 2007. They made the ingredients illegal in 2007. It hit British Columbia in 2013-ish. We made them illegal last a year ago now, I guess. The ingredients illegal. It's only started to spread across Canada, with the exception of a bit in Alberta and the Blood Tribe Reserve and some other locations in the last 12 months. It is going to blow up across Ontario and blow up across Quebec. And Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, which has had an oxycodone problem for 20 years, it's going to blow up in Eastern Canada. And we will see 5,000 to 6,000 deaths over each of the next few years. And if you're going to make hay with this, my perspective, we're going to have to convince governments to focus funding on education, focus funding on treatment centers. I mean, even in Ottawa, where we have 2 residential drug treatment centers that have seen over 900 youth go through them in the past 7 years, we still have a 5 or 6 month wait list for the most part to get a young person into a drug treatment center. That often means parents are sleeping outside their kids' doors every night so they don't run away, so they don't have to go look for them the next day or call the police to come and get them. So if we're going to try to influence public policy, I think there's some areas we can. It is around getting money into our schools, around education, and also into drug treatment centers, because this is not going to be easy. I think in 2008 I said it wouldn't be easy to do what we did when it came to support treatment, education, prevention. That was a piece of cake compared to what we're going to see coming. Because I do think they're getting their head around also how they're going to move this forward. I think it is going to take a whole of community approach to battling this. And I do think we can start lobbying our federal government to increase penalties for people who are trafficking specifically in opioids. They had very good success in some states in the United States with crystal methamphetamine around education and around increasing penalties for those selling crystal meth, ice. So I do think there's an opportunity for us to try and influence federal politicians around having legislation that makes it more serious offense if you're trafficking in opioids than if you're trafficking in other hard drugs. But it's never easy to say that because most people want to have a penalty that touches on everybody for certain drugs, and this will be much different than what we've done in the past. But I will take questions again, as I said. Yes, sir.
I don't know much about drugs. I don't know anything about drugs. Basically,
let me talk to you.
Yeah, okay. These guys are making a pill out of something and just coating it with fentanyl? Is that it?
What they're actually doing, is if oxycodone 80, as an example, is a small green round pill. So what they're doing is making something that looks just like oxycodone 80, but it's not.
Yeah.
So what it has in there instead is fentanyl, a very small. Fentanyl is 100 times stronger than morphine. Carfentanil, which is another drug that's coming, it uses a horse tranquilizer, by the way, is 1,000 times stronger than morphine. So what they will do is take a small amount of fentanyl and they'll put it in with a different, look, in some cases it could be cleaning detergent, whatever they happen to have, honestly, and a bonding agent to make it firm into a pill. And they'll run it through their own pill presses. So when it comes out, it actually says 80 on it, and they'll sell it as an oxycodone 80. So the people buying it, and I think probably, I'm not sure in the young lady's case whether she knew what she was taking, but the people buying it often think they're buying a real oxycodone. That's what they think. They don't even know that they're buying something that was made in some guy's basement in a cement mixer or with a paint can blender. So that's the challenge they have, is that they're taking something that they don't even realize.
Okay, so if it doesn't kill you, what type of reaction are they getting?
Well, in some cases, they'll get a high. I mean, I don't know, it's an opioid, like heroin, like a Percocet, like a real oxycodone. If it doesn't kill them, they'll get a high. But we had one lady from Saskatchewan who actually gave evidence in the Senate when we were going through with S225, the bill on ingredients to make them illegal, whose two sons were sharing an oxycodone 80 that they had bought off the street. And one of them got a little bit high and the other guy died. And in fact, the person who sold them that Oxy 80 died of an overdose about 6 months ago as well. So they have no intent to get anything other than high. The challenge they have is that the people mixing this aren't pharmacists. It's not a pharmacological drug. That's why I refer to it as pharmaceuticals instead of pharmaceuticals. And I'm even challenged to call it fentanyl because it never looks like fentanyl. Fentanyl, most people who've had cancer, for example, will talk about fentanyl patches that they wear, and it is a drug for them to take away the pain as they're going through cancer treatments, for example. And we had a problem with that in Manotick in 2010 when I was a police chief, for example, with kids that were buying fentanyl patches. But those kids knew what they were taking, and for the most part, I don't think we had anybody die from that. The challenge we have today is that it's being made in someone's basement, and they're sprinkling a little bit in and hoping it works. On top of that, they're now mixing it with a stimulant, which is, for example, cocaine, because they can have a lower grade cocaine, and by adding fentanyl have a higher effect and increase the value again of the cocaine that they're selling. So instead of 1 kilo of cocaine being turned into 3 kilos of low grade, they're getting 4 or 5 kilos of very low grade, adding fentanyl and selling cocaine as well. So they're using it in almost everything right now, which wasn't the norm. Opioids were not blended with stimulants. But now they're doing it for effect and to make money because it's pennies on the dollar to make. And they're selling these things for $10, $15, $20, for example, for a fake oxy.
On the other side, you said about 900 people have gone through the drug rehab.
Yes.
Okay. I've read that really, if you're really addicted, it takes about a year in one of these drug rehabs. How long do they do it?
So Dave Smith Youth Drug Treatment Center, who I still work under campaign cabinet, we're building a new facility, for example. We've had over 800 teenagers go through the program. It's a 90-day program. The closer you are to your addiction, and the closer or younger you are in age, the less likely you are to relapse. So you would certainly have greater success with young people than you do with people who have been an addict for a longer period of time. Their relapse rate is very good. Typically, if people do relapse, they're not relapsing at the same level. For example, if they're crack cocaine addicts, they're not relapsing as crack cocaine. They might be relapsing into marijuana or alcohol and find themselves back there. But the 90 days has been successful. The facility in the East End here, Harvest House, has a one-year program. They have a very successful program. They are hitting older addicts, typically, who have been at it a lot longer, and the 1 year has been very successful. But addictions is addictions. You know, my mom was a smoker, and she said it's easy to quit. She did it 20 or 30 times, right? The reality of addictions is that it never goes away, probably. It's something they're always fighting. The other thing we want to remind ourselves right now, though, is that the people we're seeing dying, a lot of the people we're seeing dying right now are not drug addicts. They are recreational users who are taking something they didn't expect. And that's what makes this difficult for us, because whether it's through the facilities downtown, supervised consumption sites, or whatever else we have to target, we may not hit those young people. And that's why our schools are probably where our success will be. Is that helpful?
No, it's great. Thank you.
I said this to someone else earlier. We've never made more arrests. We've never laid more charges. We've never had more convictions. We've never seized more dope, and the price has never been better. And it's not the solution. I mean, you have to find the choke-off point, first of all. The choke-off point probably isn't in China, the same as the choke-off point isn't on the streets of Ottawa. The choke-off point is through customs. And that's where the choke-off point is. So you have to find that choke-off point, put the resources in that location. And then on top of that, you still have to educate young people that, by the way, you know how usually you were taking ecstasy on a Friday? Not anymore. Like, that's the challenge. It's not there's not one, I'm sorry, Josh, I like I'm the only person. I feel like I'm a minister in church upstairs. It's not a one-pronged solution, and I can guarantee you, no matter what we do, it's not going to solve this very quickly.
I'm Sabra. Thank you very much for speaking tonight. I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on how schools and school boards can be involved in preventing this as another problem?
Well, we're lucky in Ottawa in that we have what's STEP, the program we have, has a counselor assigned to every high school in the city, 57 high schools. We're the only city in Canada that has that we put through the STEP program, along with the 2 drug treatment schools. So we are lucky that we do have someone assigned either from Rita Wood, Maison Fraternité, Wabano, or is it Operation Come Home or Go Home this year? He's changed his name. Anyway, so we do have resources in every attached to every high school in the city. Depending on the risk, we spend more days than some schools who are lower risk, to be fair. So we do have resources, but that's not enough to deal with this issue. Those resources are there helping young people make right decisions. You know, most young people, if they have the information, they'll make the right decision. This is going to take a much more aggressive stand, educating teachers on what they should be talking to students about. Not just about giving them naloxone, that's important. Saving lives is important, but that's not the only answer. Educating teachers, educating parents. Back to most parents think, well, my kid won't take fentanyl. They're absolutely right, they won't. But they will take other things.
Okay, I appreciate what you're saying, that resources are there in Ottawa today, to a certain degree.
Yeah.
But also, is there more that we can work with the board on? Like, honestly, speaking from experience,
Yeah.
Last year.
Which board? Are you with one of the boards?
I don't work with the board, but I'm not a parent.
It's going to help you.
But speaking with at school, speaking with the administrators at a council meeting, parent council meeting, last year, bringing it up, it was when it was starting to
Yeah.
be the news kind of thing. So bringing it up, and there was a big hesitation, like, well, we don't want to give us a mixed message to the kids. And then just about 2 weeks later, then the board came out with an information sheet, just blind information sheet to give to all the kids, thinking, okay, we need to be aware now. But I just am kind of surprised that there's a hesitation. Again, it comes
It's
back
an
to
arrogance.
what
We
you
had
said.
an arrogance on this thing. We were when we look back at opioid problems in Canada previously, it was primarily heroin. It hit Vancouver like gangbusters in the late 90s, killed lots of people. It hit Toronto to a lesser degree, a little bit in Montreal. Heroin didn't take over the country. Right? And I think a lot of people looked at the fentanyl issue as another heroin problem. That, well, we're probably not going to see it hit us like it did everywhere else. I don't think people expected to see it mixed with other drugs to the level it is. The value, the amount of money, I mean, it doesn't make any sense that dealers are killing their clients, right? It doesn't make any sense. It just shows how little they actually care about anybody. And manufacturers of illegal drugs. The challenge we have is the amount of money they can make is astronomical. And that's what they're focusing on, how much money they can make by selling whatever they want to sell with a little bit of fentanyl. When I tell you it's 100 times more powerful than morphine, and anybody talks about morphine, 100 times more powerful than morphine. It takes very little to actually make a tablet that you can sell for $15 or $20 or even more. Yes, sir.
You were saying how we can educate high
What's your name,
school-
boss?
Dylan. Dylan?
Dylan, thanks.
Hi. So you're saying how we can educate high school students. What about university students? And like, it's a bit more difficult in the sense that you can't have assemblies or counselors where there's, look at Carl, 25,000 students.
Yeah.
What can be done in that sense?
Well, that's a great point. I think first of all, it is on the university. I mean, I know they have the week leading into the beginning of classes. There's an opportunity. I know they educate them on things like security on the campus. I know they have, for example, early warning system at Carleton as an example. I think they have opportunities to do some things, but they have to add this to it. And they have to add, my 29-year-old daughter, if she was having a party, I would tell her you have to have an naloxone kit at your party. And if she, in the past, she was, my friends aren't, I would say, who cares? You have to have an naloxone kit. You have to understand, and if she'd say, I don't care what you use, just so we understand. I think it's going to take us being that aggressive. And I think at our university, we've been very lucky so far. We have over 100,000 students between our colleges, City Collegiale, Algonquin, University of Ottawa, St. Paul, and Carleton. There are over 100,000 students in the city right now, outside of high school. I guarantee we're going to see deaths there. So we better do something about that. So I do think it's incumbent on the universities. We're charging kids a lot of money. I think it's incumbent on them to also educate those kids other than just the coursework. Guy with the camera, go ahead.
Guy from the Capital Voice. Senator, from a current government policy perspective, what would you feel the top 3 objectives would be if you were making the policy or you were directing either health policy and or police enforcement? But let's stick to federal policy and then bring it down to a local policing policy standpoint, which is obviously another one of your areas of expertise.
Now you're writing a book.
I am actually.
I guess first and foremost, separating the issues, that the supervised consumption site is not the solution to this problem. It's going to be much greater than that. So I do think having a discussion around what supervised consumption sites should be versus what they are. I think Wendy Muckle at Inner City Health has her head around the fact that street drugs are not the answer. So she will be providing a replacement opioid therapy program to addicts, registered opioid addicts. I think that's first. The second part, I think, is around a national drug strategy, which ultimately would impact locally, on education, prevention, treatment, and understanding that young people, if it's only treatment, that young people are already far down that stream before we get to them. So I think it is about education piece. So I think a renewed national drug strategy focusing on this. On the enforcement piece, I do think we need a law that makes it more serious if you're trafficking in a drug like fentanyl, and we can add another drug to that if it's carfentanil, and we can add another drug to that if it's bath salts. That's killing people.
Senator.
Yes, sir.
Kevin.
What's your name, boss, sir?
Kevin.
Kevin, thanks.
I just want to follow up on some of the questions that were raised earlier about the schools. How are these folks? It was like
What part?
identified across the pond. Yeah.
Oh,
So
the other one.
the other one. When I was in school, I got a lot of. One of the things they had was bringing an awful lot of people like yourself into the classroom. The message you have here tonight, I think, is actually. I don't think people in the general public actually get to hear what you're saying. I hear that's a good thing. You know, I mean, that's a good thing. When you're telling me 50% of the users actually only go back to use it. I guess my point, to
Yeah.
sum things up, is I think the messaging has to be brought by folks like yourself, by people that, young people perspective. You really got to get into the school system at a very early age. Because that 100,000 that are there well after the kid.
No, right. 11-year-olds should hear this message.
And they're the ones that are going to influence themselves and the next generation.
Oh.
And, you know, I hate to say it, you hear the horror story, in my personal opinion, having a drug problem is a stigma. If I go to someone with an alcoholic or having cancer, people identify with that and have empathy and sympathy for it. But a lot of people tie it, like children do it, find out the hard way that they are involved with themselves with loved ones. It's the stigma of not wanting people to know that my family or somebody's friend or I'm on drugs. And I think that has to be taught, and I think it can be done in the school system and certainly through political communications as well as media. And that's just my concern.
No, I don't disagree with you. Look, the challenge we're having is that we continue to talk about addicts as if it's somebody else or somebody else's problem. I can tell you right now, there's not a street in this city that doesn't have an addict on it. Not a street in the city. I used to say that about many things, but it's very, very true. And just so we're clear on the supervised consumption side, so we walk through the way this works. The way it works today is that an individual, often an addict, will commit 4 to 8 crimes per day to satisfy their addiction. That's typical, okay? So they will commit 4 to 8 crimes. That means this front row is a victim of crime today. So that an addict can actually get enough money to buy poison made in the basement of somebody's house, often, to go into a supervised consumption site 15, maybe 20% of the time and shoot it up. And if they die, we'll bring them back to life. That's our model today. If we look at the Swiss model, for addicts, registered opioid addicts, that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about kids looking for drugs. We're talking about registered opioid addicts. They don't go commit any crimes. In fact, if they commit crimes, they may not be allowed on the program. Instead, they walk into a facility where they see a medical practitioner who prescribes them with an opioid. We do that now in Canada, by the way. It's called methadone. That's an opioid. They prescribe them with an opioid 2 or 3 times a day so they don't have to go commit crimes, so they don't support organized crime, and so they don't die on the streets. As difficult as that is to say, that's still a better model than what we're going to do. And that's the model that we should roll out. And it's the model that Canadian Police Association, a guy named Tom Stamatakis is the president. He oversees, I'll get you started, thanks, but good to see you here too. 66,000 cops he represents, supports. That the chief in Vancouver, the chief in Edmonton, the chief in Calgary support. Because every one of them say the same thing. We should be first and foremost trying to reduce crime and reduce the harm to an addict. We shouldn't have a disgust for addicts. We should actually want addicts to get the medical treatment they get. In Switzerland, the vast majority of them, in the first year of being on that program, enter rehab at least once a year. If that was my child, I'd be so happy that they entered rehab once a year.
You know, Sarah, the last thing I'll say.
That's okay.
What you just said is paramount. Like, public stigmatizes the regular drug addict, and the statistics that go with hitting that habit, which means, you know, committing a crime. That crime could be against your own family, taking your husband, family's bank account,
Stealing from mom and dad. No.
Unfortunately, people have that stigma that, well, if you're a drug addict, then you're dead for all of a sudden. You forget to humanize it. I know that there's lots of bad issues out there, but we have to debunk and stop being stigmatized.
I did an interview in this spring, in June or July, I guess, and a former drug addict emailed me who's now on methadone. I think she's been on methadone for 4 or 5 years. And she said, "You're absolutely right. I never wanted to be a criminal. No matter what else happened to me, I did not want to be a criminal. That's what I ended up being."
I just wanted to just say, this is a great discussion, but I just want to be cognizant of time too, so we'll take one last question, and then we're going to have to move on to Leo. Fine.
First was an answer to your question about the schools. The problem in Ottawa and Ontario, every principal of every school is responsible for any education or information that's passed in the school. So you have to approach every school on an individual basis at this point, unless the Ontario government has passed the education law. So that's where the big thing is, so you basically need to, if you want your school to be providing more information, it's your principal of that school.
And it's a fight.
If you have a question, Sean.
My question
Kevin's
to you
gonna
is,
kick me
yes.
off the stage.
Yeah, my question to you was, and I haven't looked at this Switzerland plan, but how does that deal with youth?
It does not. So that's why I've separated the two
Yeah,
issues.
that's fine.
This focuses on opioid addicts.
Yeah.
And it deals with the supervised consumption site, or I can't call it a safe injection site. It focuses on that. That's why the other piece is so important, because our goal can't be to get kids off drugs.
Yeah.
First and foremost, it should be educating them so they don't get on drugs. And then if they do fall through the cracks, it's picking them out through the cracks. And if they end up as an addict down in the streets, it's getting them in those supervised consumption sites. So I think the plan needs to be a longer road. There's no one, you and I both know, there's no recipe for success, right?
I was just curious.
We're mixing this on the
on what
road.
they did and where they separated that.
Thanks for the work you're doing.
Yep.
Thanks, Kevin. Thank you very much, folks.